This is Richard Wolff for Democracy at Work with another Wolff Responds. We're basically a week from the election and counting down. And I want to bring up an issue that is beyond the election, but wrapped up in it just the same. It has to do with a kind of dead end that U.S. capitalism has worked its way into. The kind of dead end that is socially explosive, even to the point of suggesting a system that is pretty far along on the road to self-destruction. Here's what I mean. A few weeks ago, President Trump, under enormous pressure, directed the Centers for Disease Control to issue a rule that he was afraid of issuing himself, governing evictions. That is, landlords forcing tenants out who have been unable to pay rent because of problems with jobs or illness related to the pandemic. And basically, landlords were told they can't evict anyone and that it would last, this ban on evictions, until the end of the year, December 31st. What has happened is the following. Landlords have largely ignored the intent of this eviction ban. They have been filing tens and hundreds of thousands of legal documents seeking eviction. They plan to move to throw people out of their apartments as soon as they legally can. They have been looking for ways around the ban, and there are such. If you can, for example, demonstrate that a person is not paying the rent, but somehow you can show it isn't related to the pandemic, well then the ban on eviction doesn't apply, and of course landlords are doing that. Landlord associations are mobilizing public relations and other supports for getting their rents paid. So what do we have here? We have a disaster either way. That's what a dead end means. It's a disaster if the landlords don't get paid. It's a disaster first and foremost for them, but they are a significant economic and social force, and they will fight back. And they will take steps that are damaging to the economy. Neglecting their properties, for example, because they're not getting paid the rents they normally would use to pay for maintaining their properties. What are they going to do? What other ways are they going to recoup themselves for their loss in ways that damage the economy? Well, you can imagine what it means if they don't maintain their properties, what it means to our cities, what it means to our neighborhoods, what it means to the people living in properties that are not being maintained. Then on the other hand, you have the mass of tenants, renters. They can't pay, they don't have the money. What are they going to do? Stop eating? Stop buying lots of other things to pay for their rent? And then what happens to all the people who used to sell them all those other things, who now have no customers? And the economic fallout, damage will just multiply. Look, it's a basic obligation of an economic system to take care of the people it's supposed to serve. It's supposed to serve the mass of renters by providing shelter for families. And it's supposed to take care of the income of landlords so they build houses, maintain apartments, and function to provide housing. A system that either can't do one or the other or both of these is a failed economic system. There's no fancy talking out of or around that. And that's exactly where we got. Because this administration and the so-called opposition did not, at the outset of this pandemic, realize that they had to take care of both the tenants and the landlords. They had to provide tenants with the means to pay the rent and landlords with the security of getting the rent, because that solves the problem. They didn't do that. They could have done it, but they didn't. They gave out billions to corporations who may or may not have needed it. We'll never know because this is not handled in a publicly documentable way. But I can tell you from my own research and that of many others, there is no excuse for a system self-destructing this way. It's a sign of a desperately broken economic system. This capitalism, ironically, is not only a disaster for the millions of renters in our society, it's also a disaster for the landlords who depend on them. A system that defaults, fails to handle the problem of housing is as bad as a system that fails to handle the problem of basic public health. We are living through a system that failed on both accounts, and that's why I call it a system on the road to self-destruction. This is Richard Wolff for Democracy at Work with another Wolff Responds.